This time we open the floor for public comments. If you have any comments you'd like to make, come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and your concerns. Morning.
As always, I thank God for the opportunity to be here. Through President Cannon, members of the County Council, County Executive, and all those assembled, good morning. My name is Mary Ashanti, and I am a resident of Wicomico County. Next, I owe you all an apology for disrupting this meeting. In the future, I will make sure it's turned off before I get to you. I just thank God that the message was at least a positive one, not a negative one. I had several things that I wanted to discuss, but first, since I am being timed, is it that I have 2 minutes or just a minute?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
It's counting down, though.
We're down to 2 minutes now?
Yes.
Oh, okay then. Okay, we sent you a letter in reference to the incident with the Wicomico, with Parkside, with Kent Island versus Parkside basketball team and the racial slurs. And this incident this is not the first year that it occurred. It occurred another year previous to this, because I saw a letter from a parent saying that it happened. But yet again, this school year, the school system had to face it again. Now, since I'm short on time, you know what the school system have done. They have tried to resolve it, but they're at a point wherein, and you can look at this letter, they're at a point where they are not going to resolve this by talking to Kent County, especially when Kent County put up on their website that they didn't do anything wrong. So what we're asking is that the Maryland State Board of Education be involved in this investigation and to resolve it, this investigation.
Okay.
That they resolve it, and that the school system asks for this help because it will not be able to be resolved by the Board of Education here. So there needs to be intervention. And the other thing, as I walk, in the past, we've not had the signs and
That's
all
okay.
that.
That's all right. You continue on. I appreciate it.
Did you all make us aware that we had 2 minutes from now on to say something?
I understand. Just you can finish out. Finish out.
Okay. Well, going forward in the future, I'll keep that in mind.
Sure.
The other thing I want to, to make it clear what we want from this Board of Education situation. The Wicomico County Board of Education did what the black community asked them to do. They are being penalized by Bayside Conference and given forfeits. So we cannot expect for the superintendent of school of Wicomico County to resolve this issue. So the bottom line is, we're asking the Board of Education, and we're asking you all to ask the Maryland State Department superintendent to come down here and investigate and correct the situation. And the last thing I'll say is that we support adequate funding for the detention center and correctional officers in reference to their salaries. The correction officers put their life on the line daily to keep inmates, visitors, and others safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shawnee.
Mary Hubner. I'm a Wicomico County resident. I just wanted to thank you all so much for hosting the forum for the Ward Museum. That was just wonderful, and I know that unfortunately you don't have jurisdiction over them or the university exactly, but I'm hoping that something can be worked out, because to me they are a fantastic tourist attraction here. And when you talk about your budget, I think, gosh, if we could have the Ward Museum back, that would certainly generate funds. And I just had one quick question. I'm a member of a group that, the Institute for Retired Persons, and we are an active group of seniors, and we like to hike. And we're wondering when Pirates Wharf, when we can get a little parking lot there so we can park at Pirates Wharf and lead hikes down there.
Mr. Miller left, or we would really have a great answer.
Actually, I do have an answer. So we have been working diligently, so they actually will be breaking ground rather soon. And so I think that the public will be able to come on this fall. So the water access won't be available just yet, but phase one, where you all be able to hike, will be in the fall.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Kubner.
Good morning, John Palmer, Wicomico County School Board. During the election, I was bombarded with questions about the conduct in schools, and that was the number one issue during our election. So I just want you to know we have been spending a lot of time in work sessions on the subject of conduct. In fact, we just sent out a survey to all teachers and parents, I believe it went out yesterday, about their direct input, anonymous input to the administration that's going to let us know their direct thoughts. And I just wanted to invite everybody, council members, members of the audience, and people out there watching on TV, that I personally will accept any invitation or any comments that you have that you can make on corrections, because a lot of times people have been through this and they have different ideas, and I would like to hear it from everybody. And you can contact any of us on our board mail, and we do read it. So I'd like to thank you for that. And I wasn't going to mention this, but somebody had said something about we need to fix the revenue cap. Mr. Hastings, thanks you. So every time somebody says something like that, I just like to give a little reminder. We never capped any revenue from the county. What this people did was they put a limitation on the amount that you could raise these taxes each year. And you could also lower the taxes each year. So just to keep that in mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Shelton. And I'm Alyssa Thawley. I'm Savannah Conaway.
And I'm Delara Gibb.
We are social work students at Salisbury University. As part of the curriculum, we are required to do a social change movement. And we all feel really passionate about mental health. So we made some calls around to just get an idea of what the waiting time is for new patients to get in to be seen by mental health. And most places, to see a licensed practitioner, the wait was over a month. And then we called the health department, which is supposed to be like the pillar of community health, and they don't even have a waiting list for their mental health section, because they're capped at social workers to patient ratio. So we decided to start a petition on change.org. This was 2.5 weeks ago?
Yes.
And so in 2.5 weeks, we've gotten just over 300 signatures to ask you guys to look at the budget and find some more money for the health department's mental health division, so that we can maybe get some more workers in there and decrease the wait period for people to get much needed mental health treatment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
My name's James Koenig, longtime resident of Wicomico County. I was down at the West Side Community Center last night. I do a lot of traveling with the military, so I'm not in town that much. I saw the changes they did down at Cove Road, what they did, Nanticoke. I'm a little disappointed. Cove Road has a high bacteria count every year. What they did there is just going to make the situation worse. I hope they're done, that they don't do any more down along Nanticoke, because it's just going to make that situation worse. I sit here and I listen through this whole council meeting, and it's always about money, 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 budgets, revenue caps. You know, you can't be all things to everybody. And I'm kind of wondering, you know, I hear the sheriff's department, and believe me, working with the military, I'm all about public safety. But I look at things like maintenance of effort. I look at things like the grants, what regulations are attached to them, what other commitments have you signed up for? And I'm just wondering, who sets the priorities and who researches all this stuff to see what you're putting the taxpayer on the hook for? You spent $500,000 down there at Cove Road, taxpayer has to pay that back, and I think it's just made the situation worse. So my question is for this council, who looks at the regulations, whether it's feds with the airport, state, whatever it is, that we're signing the taxpayer up for? You're making commitments for those funds for future years. As you see with the revenue situation, whether it's our personal pocketbooks at home or whatever, the situation in this country, in this world, we have to set priorities. And I'm wondering whose responsibility on this council it is to look at all that stuff and say, hey, yeah, we can move in this direction. It's good for the taxpayer. And you know what? Sorry, it's not going to make the list this year. We have to do it in our personal budgets. I'm just wondering, how does it work with the council?
I appreciate it. We allow public comments for input from the public, but we don't engage in discussion back and forth. So we appreciate your comments. If you would like to leave your email with Mrs. Hurley, we could certainly address those concerns. Is that okay with you?
Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, council comments.
Yeah, and kind of in regard to what he was saying, I would like to look into SU and UMES for legislative aids as an internship. I think that would be very beneficial for us as council members to have someone with us helping us take notes and helping us stay on track and helping us do research on things that come down the pipe. And I think it might actually be very beneficial for the administration if we have a legislative aids just to help things along. And if they're interns, that means that's not going to cost the county a whole lot of money, if any. And I just think that would be beneficial. And I don't know, is there a motion that I can take that we can look into doing that?
Not at this time, James. I'd say it's something that you could, if you want to review it, and if you have a proposal to get it out for the council.
Right, so I'm asking for council to allow Laura to look into it.
Laura would certainly look into anything that any individual council member might request.
Okay.
So that's, I don't think you need council approval for that.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing it right, but
Well, once we come to the decision as to whether or not we would formally do it, the council would possibly take make that decision as a body. But as far as just the exploratory part of it, I think Mrs. Hurley could certainly do that for you.
sure, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, also, I'd like to, maybe we could have a work session coming up on our council budget. I just want to go over a few things and make sure that, we're not too over top heavy in our council budget. And I would like to have a session that we could just talk about it and work on it some more. Thank you.
Any other council comments? Josh?
I know Rachel and the other students that were cared about mental health have left, but I did want to say I did attend a great meeting this week with I'm on the aging commission, and Tidal Health has a new Tidal Health Crisis Center. I always get the words wrong, but either way, across from across from Evo, there's a new facility there for mental health. They are currently doing incredible things and trying to grow. They're going to try to go for 24 hours to be open, but they have physicians on call. So anyone experiencing any kind of mental health or any kind of health related crisis along those lines are welcome to go in. And so they want to try and get the word out, but it's a really fantastic, what they're doing there is really fantastic. It's great to hear. It's great for our community. And I think the services are going to be something really helpful in the future.
Any other comments? I'll tell you, Josh, because I thought about that too, and Ms. Shelton was talking, but I wasn't sure if that particular facility would address what their concerns might be.
Yeah, and I wasn't quite sure also. I think it would. This is a newer facility, and I know Tidal Health has had its changes and mergers, but from what I understand, this is going to be this is a new center, a new initiative, and they've got a new facility put in there. But yeah, thank you.
Any other council comments? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn from legislative session to go into open work sessions, followed by a closed work session pursuant to the local government article section 3-305B1 to discuss a personnel matter pertaining to the appointment of an assistant director of administration to protect the confidentiality of the individual.
So move.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Legislative session is adjourned. First item on the open work session. Welcome, Mr. John McClellan. How are you, sir?
Still morning.
Still morning. We're still there.
Well,
I'm surprised it's still morning.
doesn't seem like it. Is that going to be on here? Oh, okay. So you want me to drive too? I appreciate the opportunity to come before you. Looking back, whenever I'm doing a slide presentation, the first thing I do is look at the last slide presentation that I did for a particular group. Come to realize it's been July of 2019 since I sat before this body, which seems like most of us, there's a time in our life that was pre-COVID, you know, and some of the topics we're gonna touch on, you'll see words that are of a concern in our industry that we never heard of 4 years ago. So as soon as we get her booted up, I'm sorry if I should have had that here sooner. All right. Assuming any technical difficulties. What I'd like to do is just kind of give you an overview of what's been happening in the county, what's happening in kind of our industry, some impacts you all and some of the things you're talking about might be able to help or at least be aware of from a commercial real estate perspective. I'm going to touch just briefly on residential, although I am far from a residential expert. Wicomico, last one down there. Sit, enter, okay. All right, so again, I'm John McClellan with SVN Miller Commercial Real Estate. I know most of you here. In fact, I think I know all of you here. So where have we been? Where has the county been? What kind of has happened? Again, I haven't been here since 2019. So just wanted to touch base on, and I don't know whether any of you ever look at this, what type of real estate volume flows through this county? Obviously, you have the benefit of recordation tax. County does not have a transfer tax, as you know. Speaking of controversial topics. But in 2021, we did $138 million in transactions. That is actually, that's just commercial improved transactions. There's another significant amount of money we'll talk about later in residential. I purposely, because I'm not an expert, I did not look at farms and land and unimproved properties, but improved commercial in 2021 was 138 million. 166 million on actually fewer transactions, and I'm going to touch on some of those transactions and what they are, and the difference between what we learn, you know, in our industry, multiple list service is typically where you think most of the transactions are. As a reference point, in 2022, the multiple list service reported 30 million in transactions. So you can see there's a lot of private transactions, a lot of out-of-town transactions, perhaps from a out-of-town buyer, out-of-town seller transacting a commercial property in Wicomico. For 2023, we've already had about 21 transactions. So we're a little, if you extrapolate that out, we're a little behind and only about 12 million in transactions. It's always fun to look back. Sometimes things happen that even we don't realize took place. The top 10 sales in 2021 of the $110 million, or $136 million, I'm sorry, about $59 million of them were made up in 10 sales. So Tide Mill Apartments sold for $10,800,000. Fruitland Plaza, where Food Lion is, sold for $7.5. The Five Guys, Chipotle buildings, these are all investment properties, which is a big driver, $6.1 million. PetSmart, little building right in front of Home Depot, you wouldn't think would be worth 6.1, but somebody thought it was. And the brand new 7-Eleven, that little 7-Eleven at Westwood Drive, sold for $5.5 million. Some of these numbers are kind of mind-boggling, what people see in the long-term value. In 2022, we had $101 million made up in the top 10 sales, or over 60%. Some of these numbers are huge. You thought the Tide Mill was expensive. The Greens apartment sold last year for $24.5 million, probably at the peak of the multifamily demand, the kind of the frothy over demand that people were paying for multifamily assets. Of course, our own Pohanka Automotive purchased the Safford family of dealerships. That is just the real estate value. I'm sure there was an additional value for the dealerships that were not disclosed to. The next two, and I'm gonna put them up at the same time, very interesting, Peninsula Orthopedics and Peninsula Cardiology, both sold to a Montana-based investor on the same day. So somebody came to Wicomico County and spent about $23.5 million in one day for 2 5-year leasebacks. So they believe so much in Wicomico County, the rent to price relationship between those is very, very low. And I think some people looked at this market and looked at these assets and looked at these operations, and they really believe in the county. They believe in our health system, because those are two of the most known properties. Sadly, I was soliciting both listings and didn't get either one. So I might have been speaking to you from the Bahamas. And American Tire Distributors, just another warehouse sale in Northwood. Top sales of 23, we haven't had many. Westwood Business Center, those of you that like Texas Roadhouse, that doesn't mean they're going out of business. That just means the building got sold and somebody else is collecting the rent. Was a business transaction. It's had various names over the years. It's now Old Father. The mulch company, the mulch production company in Pittsville that bags and ships, was recently sold earlier this year for $1.6 million. That's the real estate. But what's the big theme in all of these? I'm just going to hit them all. 8 out of 10 sales out of town, 8 out of 10 sales out of town, 3 of the top sales already in 23 out of town. To me, that says Wicomico County is viewed as a positive place to do business. I was talking with some investors, literally from Dallas, and he said one of his first criteria is it's a business-friendly place to invest. He will not invest in a state or a county that is not business-friendly. So as part of your job is you're looking, is this breaking up as I'm talking? I kind of hear it.
Just have to step back or go back a little bit.
Step back a little bit, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't hear myself. Whoa, what are we doing here?
It's probably a reminder for update.
Remind me tomorrow, okay. Remind you tomorrow. But one of the criteria for many investors, be it a small private equity fund, private investor, or a major corporation, they're going to look at markets. We just heard a presentation at our forum last week from Blackstone, one of the largest REITs in the world, and they were talking about how their investments are guided not just by the numbers, but where the numbers are. You know, there's certain states, certain counties, certain regions they're going to flock to, and there's certain counties and states they're going to run away from. So keep that in mind as we continue to try to be a great place to do business. That's going to bring these outside dollars into our community who are going to pay taxes, most importantly, to the county. What headwinds are we facing in our industry? Obviously, interest rates, 7.5, depending on your borrowing ability. It's obviously that's a lot different. Now, some people that are older, or old as me and as old as John, are gonna, he's older than me. They're gonna say, oh, I remember lots of times I bought my first house at 9%. And as our economist last week in our presentation said, I'm not impressed. You paid 9%, but I'm not impressed.
John, being even older than you, 12.5%.
12.5%. Henry Hanna will tell me he paid 18%. I'm still not impressed. But the market, the economy can still thrive at 5, 6, 7% interest rates. We've been spoiled for very, very long at 3, 3.5, 2.5, whatever your interest rates are. But it's going to have an impact. Banks and lenders are stronger, much stronger underwriting. If you don't know what DCR and LTV, debt coverage ratio, how much income do you have compared to your debt payments, and what's your loan value compared to the value of the property. And both of those are going to get tighter. They're going to ask for more coverage, and they're going to ask for lower loan to value. Just as prices fluctuate, tenants fluctuate, banks are going to look for more of that. Some lenders are not even making certain loan types. Last week, M&T reported they're doing almost no ground-up office construction. We all know the problems with hybrid work and some of those things, but that's going to have a direct impact on new speculative. And they said, really, it's the reason is you can't predict the rent, you can't predict the demand 2 years out, nor can you predict the cost. Supply chain is still, and labor costs and construction costs are still massively affecting the industry. So hospitality is out for some lenders. You're going to see more of that kind of stuff. Appraisals are a mishmash. They're just, appraisers are looking at, well, okay, you paid $200 a square foot for this building. That's because lumber prices were out of sight. Well, that lumber's not in your building is now not worth what you paid for it. So how do we appraise it? Which creates a real conundrum to valuation. As interest rates go up, the value of a building typically comes down, an investment property. How do all those factor in? So it's really a headwind that we're having to deal with and lenders having to deal with, thus tighter underwriting standards. Inventory remains tight. Nationwide, really, industrial real estate, you can't find a good solid warehouse. That, in my opinion, that's why we'll talk about it in a minute. Brett Davis purchased the Campbell Soup plant. Many of us that are old know it's Campbell Soup. Others know it's an old building on West Road. But because he's realizing the inventory is so tight, there's an opportunity to reuse those good quality bones over there. So it's continuing to be tight. I heard this morning, I read an article that multifamily rents are starting to finally decrease. And as multifamily rents decrease, demand for multifamily property drops off, values maybe level out, and certainly they had gone crazy, thus the $24.5 million at the Greens. Wonder how that guy's feeling if the rents come down. But that's going to be a factor. Inflation, obviously inflation in so many factors, but we're negotiating leases. We used to just always say, you're going to sign a 5-year lease, your rent's going to be this, and it's going up 3% a year. Nobody questioned it, or 2.5% a year. Nobody would question it. Today, well, landlord wants CPI. The tenants absolutely do not want CPI because they don't know what it's going to be. We negotiate a cap or a floor and all kinds of ranges. And what ultimately happens is instead of a 10-year commitment, they'll commit to 3. Or they might do a 5-year lease, but the rent's subject to negotiation after 3. So that's going to have an impact on long-term values. And obviously, labor shortages are going to continue to affect construction costs. What are my fellow advisors and others in the industry saying? Our market's still active, very active. We expect 23 to be a good year. The question is end of 23, beginning of 24. There is still ample cash on the sidelines. And what that does is there's people waiting that lending doesn't bother them, or, okay, I have to borrow 50% instead of 70%. I've got more cash to put into the deal. And always, there's people sitting on the sidelines. There are some right now waiting, kind of hoping that 2008 occurs again, because they made a lot of money in 2008 because it was the golden rule. Those who had the gold made the rules. And banks were wholesaling property, getting rid of foreclosed property. They hope that happens again because that's where they make their money. Most of us don't hope that happens again, but there's a lot of cash waiting to be deployed. Capital from banks is available, is just perhaps under more stringent requirements. The sky isn't falling yet. There's some predicting it's going to fall. There's some factors that are causing great concern, one of which was reported last week. There's $400 billion of commercial debt with the loans maturing this year, meaning they got to be paid back or they got to be refinanced. And a lot of lenders are saying, great, we'll refinance it at 7% instead of 3%, or we'll finance it with 60% loan to value instead of 80%. And there's a lot of borrowers throwing their hands up. So you are going to see some debt or some properties come to the market, and the bank officers in charge of foreclosures are probably going to get a little busier. But I don't think it's a major calamity. The landing may be hard. There's different economists. You listen to 3 economists, you're going to get 3 opinions. Some are saying, most are saying it's going to be a relatively soft, there's going to be a recession, but it's going to be soft, it's going to be short-lived. There's others who I talked to a guy this morning, he's like, 400 billions of debt, interest rates going up, Fed fund rates going up, just put your heart, he's one of these, put your Hillard hat on, the sky's falling. So, but just to be aware that things are. The question is it going to be late 23, early 24? But as in most cases, even during COVID, when so many companies were pulling in, we all know the stories of companies that just bloomed and expanded and really, really grew. Owners will consider alternatives. If they can't get their loan, but they need equity to expand their business, they may do something called a sale leaseback, where they'll sell their building, lease it back, but they'll get 100% of their equity, not 70 or 60 or 80, whatever a bank will give them, and they sometimes can even get a higher value. We've done multiples of those in the last couple of years, and that's just going to free up that cash to go do what they want. Maybe buy another company, maybe invest in a piece of machinery rather than owning real estate as their investment. So, thank you. The pipeline of projects and things that are happening. Campbell Soup, we talked about. We personally leased one of our shining stars, Chesapeake Shipbuilding, leased about 35,000 square feet in that building. Obviously, they're a little landlocked where they are, but they can't relocate. And that's going to continue to be a shining star. We've got another local company looking at space out there as well. So that's going to be good for our area. A lot of residential, Coventry apartments. There's another 200 units planned for Naylor Mill, under construction behind Vernon Powell. If you haven't seen those apartments back there, that's a major project. And Jasmine Drive behind the old Golden Corral, behind the Hampton Inn, that's another 200 apartments that is working their way through final approvals. The Purdue Henson Junior Achievement Center, that's a nonprofit asset. That is a big deal for our community. To draw that many students and draw that much attention to our community. If you haven't been there, take a look. It's pretty amazing. Public safety complex, I know you all are very familiar with that, and speaking of construction costs, but that activity, although it's a government-funded activity, will generate, they say activity begets activity. We've already got a major developer who's coming here to the Eastern Shore because he's totally fed up with the metropolitan counties, say, those people don't want anything done. They don't want new investment. They want to just sit back, hug in, and forget about it. They're now coming to Wicomico County where they never would have come in many, many markets. They're now coming here looking at building some major construction, and one of the sites they're looking at is directly across the street from this project because they see how cool that's going to be and how good of an impact on the community that's going to have. So I really expect to see more and more of this. Not a lot of people know about it. I know you all know about it. The Aviation Maintenance Program, UMES at the airport, that's a big deal. That's a big deal for any employer, technical skills, and I applaud you for your role in helping get that off the ground. I'm good friends with Eric Morgan at Piedmont, and he is a huge proponent, as you know, of that project. Quick summary. I told Wes Cox in my office put this together, and he was whining because I borrowed his slides, so I've given him public credit. If you see Wes, you can make note of it that I gave him credit. But just kind of a summary that our inventory is low. The sales are up 20% over 2020, and that's kind of looking at kind of a net. The total value of sales is up year over year. The number of sales is down, meaning the higher value or higher average sale. Leasing continues to be very strong, continuing up 26%. I think you'll see more leasing as there's product available. As people are capital restricted, they're going to lease rather than buy or build. Investment property continues to be hot. Buyers, unfortunately, the cash buyers are thinking it's 2009. The sellers are thinking it's 2022. So that conundrum will get worked out. And properties priced appropriately, they will sell. They will sell. It's not a sky's the limit, set your price and somebody will pay it, as it was for a while, especially in residential. Strong demand. He had a Sussex County section on here, just for reference, that you cannot find a warehouse at all in western Sussex or eastern Sussex County. There's nothing over there. Pricing. There's less than a 10% price disparity between listing price and selling price over the last couple of years. That's actually a pretty tight number. Sometimes if that number gets wide, buyers are just lowballing or sellers are just not being realistic. Couple of stats on there about days on the market for properties that are still listed and days on the market for properties that have sold. Again, priced right properties will sell sometimes as much as 5 months quicker than just sitting there. So if you know somebody that's selling a property, price it right, put a little cushion on, price it right, or you're just going to sit there. I'm not good enough to know why those arrows don't show up like everything else. But quick residential update. I'm not a residential agent, but I know enough to where to get some data from the Bright MLS system. Again, this doesn't include everything in the county, because one thing we did experience last year residentially was some portfolio purchases. Some people sold rental portfolios, and you'll see a $2.5 million residential sale. Well, it was for 10 properties. And so you saw a lot of those. And again, that's outside business coming into Wicomico County to buy these portfolios. But traditional residential sales, we had $367 million on 1,582 units. 2022 was $340 million, down a little bit, both in sales. So volume was down 7.5, units were down 17, but the average price went up about 5%, which is indicative of what you would expect, that the price continues to climb. Here's the troubling part from a residential standpoint. You drive all over town and you're seeing D.R. Horton and Ryan and all the rest of them building houses. However, it's still a tight inventory. I have a friend who's been looking for a home under $300,000 with a garage. Has what we call a hot sheet. Laurie knows all about those. It'll send you an email every time a new listing comes up. In the last 3 months, they've seen three new listings that didn't instantly come up and get snatched with multiple offers. So despite what you see, a lot of demand, a lot of supply, new supply, there's still 170 listings, which if we took no new listing based on the current velocity, the inventory would sell out in 2.2 months. Healthy inventory is about 9 months of supply. So we are way, way tight on inventory. And of those 170, just a wild guess, but a good third of them are probably overpriced or unsaleable or some other kind of issue. So it's not like you got 170 beautiful homes that are ready to sell. What are our challenges? Obviously, new housing growth. I think this one's probably more important than any of them. Skilled, trained, ready to work workforce. We all know business owners who can't find people. Although I did talk to a manufacturer yesterday who said, it's been great. I've got skilled people even through COVID, had no problems. One of the few. But happy that he's happy. Innovative educational improvements. I mean, we're continuing to work. I know you guys are continuing maintenance of effort and all the stuff. Public, private schools, SU, Warwick. We got some tremendous assets here. I just encourage you to always be looking and make sure your department heads are looking at, yes, you're a government approval. And government approvals are, the famous line, we're from the government, we're here to help you. But however more friendly we can be, and we can go in different counties. Some counties are arduous, and some counties are, much easier. The reason that big developer is in Wicomico County is, and I'll say it on the public record, Prince George's doesn't want his business, and he's a pretty good business person. So looking at our process, make sure that our department heads are aware that ultimately they're the customers. The people who are coming here to invest and develop and build businesses, they're the customers. The smoother we can make that, the better we're going to be viewed as a county. Obviously, sanitary sewer is a big issue you all are well aware of. I also call it the denominator issue. The denominator issue is too often, and it can work for and against us. You'll hear when the Salisbury MSA led, whatever statistic. Well, the Salisbury MSA is 4 counties of 400,000 people. It's not Wicomico. It's not the city of Salisbury. We just fortunately were named that. So it can work in a positive, but can also work in a negative when they look at it and they say, well, there was X crime statistic divided by the 120,000 people in the county, and it makes it look high. but it's because we're an urban core, an urban center. So just got to be aware of it as we're reporting. I found this interesting, and I'm I'm wrapping up, I promise. I did, at my last presentation, there's an organization called the Counselors of Real Estate, nationwide organization. They poll their members every year for what are the top 10 issues facing their industry right now. So 2019 and 2022, the top 10 issues that they were concerned about. 2019, number 10 was public and private debt. Today, it's ESG requirements. You all know what ESG requirements are? Environmental, social, and governance. You know, and there's a movement afoot to classify buildings with an ESG score and what their impact is. And so that's now made the top 10 list of concerns. Consumer confidence in 19, cybersecurity in 22. Population migrations, regulatory uncertainty. And I know you all see that from just what the state puts down on the county. Capital markets, lending, housing imbalance. Political division, we still probably have some of that. Labor shortages. End of cycle economics, meaning they were worried in 19 about the great boom of 16, 17, 18 coming to an end. Now we're worried about not energy supply, energy resilience. We all saw stories of brownouts in California and the demand for electric cars and some of this kind of stuff and what that's going to do to our ability to provide energy resilience. The technology effect, all this changes in technology, what's that doing to the industry? Now we're worried about supply chain. That's one of those words in 2019. We all knew what the supply chain was. That's where stuff comes from, and it gets here when we need it. Now it's a different discussion. Climate change was an issue. Now hybrid work's an issue. We never heard these words. Housing affordability, geopolitical risk, warring factions, countries, Russia, take your pick. Number one in 19 was infrastructure, the infrastructure bill. We heard all about that. Now we're worried about inflation and interest rates. So I just found that kind of eye-opening as to what was on people's minds 4 years ago and where we are today. And I think we can all see how we got, or at least realize we got there. How do we keep winning as a county? We got to welcome new businesses, welcome these new developers, make them feel like they belong. It's interesting. One of the things with Dave Ryan we did was we introduced him, this developer, to Mayor Heath. And we said, well, they'd like to kind of take a tour of the area. We were thinking about getting a bus. And he said, well, we'll use the city trolley. And the developer's jaw about hit the table. Wait, the city is going to use their vehicle to take, what? Take us on a bus ride? That doesn't happen. And the county would do many of the same kind of things. Can't be like them. Got to continue to encourage, make it a business-friendly place. We got to be responsive. Got to collaborate across the region. We're an MSA. We talked about that. You all know that, Tri-County Council and whatnot. Leverage the assets we have. We have so many tremendous assets. Airports, transportation, rail, that air training center, that's huge. Wallops, obviously, educational resources, Warwick, Salisbury, medical resources, tremendous asset, as you all know. And that's the slide you all been waiting for. I know. I see John. I'm holding him up. Is lunch coming up next? You taking a lunch break?
We've got a couple more people. I don't want to hold them up.
Somebody call a pizza for him.
Yeah.
Can I answer any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, most of these places that are being bought, are a lot of them getting loans or they're coming in with cash? Because I know personally, a lot of houses just being sold with just cash offers.
There, like I said, there's a lot of cash on the sidelines. I think most of the, in my opinion, most of the investment properties, the higher end, they're going to have some kind of debt. They're not going to be borrowing 80 or 85%. They may borrow 50%. One of the assets I was involved in, Westwood Business Center, when we sold that, they borrowed 40% on that property. What's happening, a lot of people, if you're familiar with a 1031 exchange, they sell a property for a big capital gain. If they invest in another property within a certain set of criteria, so they've got a lot of cash from this highly inflated sale over here that they're rolling into that, which is continuing that cash demand on properties. I also want to leave you, I'm going to ultimately leave you with we had our forum last week, and it's our whole Eastern Shore real estate guide. So I'll leave those with Laura.
With respect, I know you said the inventory's low across the board. With respect to the commercial, what's the most square footage in demand right now? What range? Small, medium, large?
I would say probably still, Wicomico, we're not going to get those big Amazon distribution buildings that are on I-95, 85, 83, because we're not really a throughput. We're an end run kind of transportation system. I would say probably in that 10,000 range, 5, 10, 15,000 be a good average. Mostly industrial. Office space, if you want 5 or 10,000 square feet of office, it'll take me a while to type up the list, but we'll get you some. So,
Thank you.
question?
I just wanted to say, I'm really super excited about the investor by Westwood. So I was really excited to kind of,
You know who I'm talking about.
I know exactly who it
Although
is.
they
Yes, I'm
say, I mentioned their name to somebody last week, and I got a text from the gentleman at our forum. He says, "Excuse me, we're very secretive."
don't say my name, yeah.
So-
Well, I'm very excited about that, so
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing that.
And at the point,
through.
and you'll be invited on the bus ride, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So when they come, they're bringing the patriarch of the organization. They hope.
Yeah.
So
Very excited.
that would be a really cool deal.
Yeah.
John, we really appreciate coming in. I've always felt, honestly, that the commercial real estate industry sort of is the barometer for the community, for Wicomico County per se. You always seem to have your pulse on the economic headwinds, and I think it's important to have this. And we appreciate you taking the time and preparing the presentation. And glad you brought the.
I'll leave these. I'll leave these with Laura. She can pass them around to everybody. I think I got copies for everybody. And then, and any of you, my card's on here. Silly question. What's going on there? Happy to help.
Yeah, very informative.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Very
Thanks,
good.
sir.
Thank you all.
Next item we have on the agenda is the American Rescue Plan. Mrs. Oland and Mr. Miller. Oh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this started with a request from the Civic Center. So on our capital improvement plan, there is a request to renovate the escalator at the Civic Center. We had our annual inspection of that. The state came in and basically said that the handrail on that escalator, and that escalator is original to the building. The escalator handrail needs to be replaced. The escalators, as we stated, are original to the building, and as such, are beginning to show their age. Escalators should have the ability to be able to change direction. Our escalators do not have that ability. They don't like to go any other direction but the direction one goes up, one goes down, and you can't change them and change that. So, for example, when we're coming in for an event, we could have both going up or have both coming down at the end of an event, and right now we can't do that. The escalators do not like to operate in opposition of their normal path. As such, we need to replace these handrails, but when we go to renovate the complete unit, those handrails would have to be cut off and new ones would have to be purchased. So what we're asking for is funding from the American Rescue, unallocated funding to be able to renovate completely those two escalators and start that process now so that when we get to our we're in our slow season in the summertime, so we'd like to go ahead and get this started, get the process going, and renovate. Renovate is actually the better course of action for us because we might have to take the front of the building, all the doors off, because you actually take the escalators in on a new, in like one piece. And so replacing them is not the most economical format for us. And so we're asking council to approve the use of American Rescue funds in the amount of $825,000 for the Civic Center escalators. So to give you kind of a background, we have $10 million that the federal government has stated that we can use for any purpose. They count that as our lost revenue during the during the COVID impact. And so it doesn't have to meet any of the criteria of water, sewer, broadband, tourism, and some other things associated. We had $10 million to spend in there. We now allocated $960,000 to fire departments in our first fiscal year of having that. In the last fiscal year, we allocated $3.8 million to the public safety building. In the budget that you have, we're requesting $4.1 million for wetland mitigation. Still remaining have enough funding for the Civic Center escalators at $825,000. Additionally, just recently, Steve has also requested an additional $150,000 for matching funds associated with the Pirates Wharf building. So since this went on the agenda 2 weeks ago and then got pulled, we've also had another request for $150,000. So there, that $150,000 and the $825,000, we would still have $100,000 remaining in this section. We would not have overspent the $10 million. So we're asking council for the $825,000 first, and if at all possible, since this hasn't gone to legislation yet, also $150,000 for Pirates Wharf.
For the money for Pirates Wharf, what's it for?
So it's for the phase one of the project. So when the costs of this project are significantly higher, one, just the cost of everything is higher. Secondly, we've had to go through, one example is 3 archaeological studies that have cost us about $150,000. So a number of those things have added up, and we've leveraged the local funding that we had originally into over $3 million. We leveraged that to get grants and then get other grants. But now the costs of everything, we're having to increase the grant requests, and when you increase that, you need to be able to match those. So this local funding would allow us to match, continue with the building, and fulfill the timeline that the executive explained a little earlier.
Consensus?
Looking for consensus to come forward to council for a budget amendment and a capital improvement plan or capital budget amendment to utilize $825,000 for the Civic Center escalator and $150,000 for Pirates Wharf.
Is that every escalator, like all the escalators?
There's two,
There's
yeah,
two.
so it would be both escalators.
Okay.
Is that a consensus we should do before looking at the budget?
Well, you could ask that question. Yeah, I mean, I believe 100% in how you manage, Steve. I really do, and I know you never waste money. You find money where we can't even find it half the time. An $825,000 expense over a $40,000 expense, from what we've heard before with the budget concerns. I think that's what Shane was sort of alluding to, and Pam, it'd be your responsibility as well. How far do you think we may be digging ourselves in a hole based on what we're seeing over this next year?
So our recommendation, both administration and Rec Parks and Tourism and Finance, is that it's more financially prudent for us to replace or renovate completely these escalators and utilize this funding for that, because again, it's not coming from our savings account, it's coming from money that we have available for us to do this. It doesn't, in my opinion, make financial sense to put a handrail on that then will have to be cut off in a year and thrown out. We have basically been told by the people that install these handrails that if we put a new handrail on to meet this state request, there is very little chance that it could be saved in a complete renovation of those escalators. So you'd be doing $825,000 plus $40,000, and those escalators have reached their useful life. We would expect, in our opinion, that there would be other things in the future that the state is going to say need to be done to these escalators to keep them in service. And unfortunately, our annual inspection comes up right about the time our busiest season is going to hit. And as you know, by going to the Civic Center, that is our most efficient way to utilize and move people to the second floor because we have one elevator. And so, and our stairwells are primarily emergency exit stairwells. We don't have people utilize those stairwells to move around the building. Yes, we could fix those escalators in place, but again, it's much more efficient to move people up to the second floor using the escalator process. So it has been in our capital improvement plan. We have punted it a couple years. It's been in the capital improvement plan basically since I joined the county 10 years ago. I think we've reached the point that we can no longer punt this. And so I think it makes the financial sense to utilize this funding and to get the project done without Band-Aiding and possibly having to throw out that Band-Aid in a year.
It's hard to give a consensus vote without looking at this at the same time.
Yeah, again, and that's why I gave you the explanation that there is, I don't believe there are other things there's not much else in the budget that we can utilize American Rescue Plan funding for at the moment, except for capital projects, and we believe that this is an appropriate capital project to utilize instead of taking it out of our savings account. Because actually, in our previous CIP, we had been looking at actually either borrowing the money or using our savings account, and so we wouldn't be using either one. So it is saving the funds for other projects within the county. And again, doing it now instead of waiting for the budget time allows us to get this process started, showing the state that we're moving forward on this recommendation of the handrail, and also hopefully getting it in the queue so that we can do most of this renovation work in our slow time at the Civic Center, which happens to be July and August.
If we were to do the quick $40,000 fix that and do the larger expense down the road, that $825,000 could very easily turn into $1 million, right?
Correct.
Okay.
With the cost of everything, again, the 825 is the current estimate from a reputable company locally for us to do this work. And to meet all current standards of the state, and we would believe then that we would have no issues passing for years to come our inspections.
My question is, why wasn't this just put in the budget? I mean, you had the American Rescue funds that you need this project done. So why isn't it in the budget instead of coming to us separately?
So the reason we're moving it forward, it was in the budget. We're asking to accelerate the timeline so that we can so again, when we created the CIP, we put it in the CIP. But we're asking for this to be accelerated because of the fact that we failed the inspection between the time we started the CIP process and now. Additionally, we want to accelerate the project and do it now versus waiting till July 1st when this money would be available, which would push out the ordering and the starting point and could put these escalators out of service during our peak time.
How long is it going to take them to put the escalators in once you order them?
I don't remember the lead time.
Yeah,
They'll be out of service anyway for a period of time.
And that's why we want, sorry, go ahead, Katie.
We would look for Katie Rouse, Deputy Director for Recreation, Parks, and Tourism. So what we're trying to do is do it when the summer, when it would have the least amount of effect on our events. Whereas if we wait and have to put them out of service during our event season, it would be a lot more detrimental to the public and the guests coming into the building. Our hope would be that we'd be able to get it done when we had less things going on in the building, or items that were, a lot of the things that we have in the summer are downstairs only. We have the USSSA lunch and things like that, but that doesn't require access to the second floor on those. So.
What's the build-out time on this when you give the order to build?
There was a lead time on the materials, and we'd have to get back to you on. I don't remember off the top of my head. It was several weeks on that.
So again, the process when we came to you, if I remember correctly, doing it now, the lead time should have us, as long as nothing else has hiccuped, that should have us doing it during our slow time. If we wait till July 1st, we wouldn't be able to get it done during our slow time.
Yeah, I mean, initially I have reservations, but honestly, I think the reality of it is we're either going to pay now or we're going to pay later. and we're going to pay more later.
And we're going to throw out brand-new railings. Because, I mean, we have to do that railing aspect now.
That's a safety, the inspection, it was a safety inspection that those were cited on. And the other issue with the 40,000 is we don't currently have that in the budget. That wasn't budgeted for from a repair standpoint to make that $40,000 repair in this.
So we would be coming to council for $40,000 to then turn around and ask for additional funding later to throw out the $40,000.
We're going to set.
question.
Yes.
So I understand the ARPA report is due to the federal government, like it was due at the end of April. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're in April. It'll be due at the end of April.
Yes. Can you provide us with a copy of that once that is?
When it's complete, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody else? Okay. All right. If you'll put it on the, if you'll get it ready for Ms. Hurley, put on the agenda. Great. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, if we could. 5-minute recess. And then we're going to, and I know we're up against lunch, but right now we're just going to take the recess. Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda for the 2023-08 Wicomico County Council work session is a license agreement with SBY Elite. Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Miller, Director of Recreation Parks and Tourism. We have a small concession stand out at Billie Jean Jackson Park, which is a county-owned and operated park. Over the winter, we put out to bid for requests for nonprofit groups who wanted to operate the concession stand at the park. We received 2 bids, and the bid that we had recommended through purchasing through that process was SBY Elite. They offered to pay the county. It's a $1,500 annual lease payment to the county, so we would not pay anything. We'd be receiving a check for their ability to operate the stand. So in addition to a small amount of revenue, the stand also provides a service to the programs and events that take place there, so they would completely operate that stand. And the term proposal is for 3 years, so that's why we're here to seek your input or approval for a multi-year agreement. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I really didn't look at the agenda, or I would have waited 5 minutes before
that's all right.
this. This is an easy one. Everybody's good, right?
I'll just, what
Joe.
process do you go through to make sure these folks are, whoever's leasing, I know it's a LLC or whatever, to make sure they're capable of paying, that they have the correct insurance? Is all that taken care of?
Yes. Yeah, that's all in the lease. So they submitted some of their experience as part of that RFP process. They submitted that, so we reviewed that, and they're required to have insurance. All those things are in the agreement. Yes.
So this will come back at our next meeting, or?
No, not the next meeting. Lease agreements actually require 3 weeks' worth of advertising. So we can have the public hearing on May the 16th at 10 a.m.
Okay, everybody good? Yes, Jeff. Steve?
Are they subject to health department regulations?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
they're required to get permits.
We're good there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Steve. Appreciate it. So I guess we're going to take, what time is the Board of Ed supposed to be coming in now, Laura?
12:30.
12:30. All right, we're going to take a 15-minute lunch, and we'll be back here at 12:30.
15 minutes.